quick intro. We're going to go over 4 things to keep in mind as you start exploring your careers. We're going to do a 2-part activity that should take about 10 minutes. And then the remainder of our workshop, about like the last 30 minutes or so, will be dedicated to our panel. And then that's when you get to ask any questions that you might have, any advice that you want to ask our panelists, all of that. And then we're going to end with our survey and closing. If you have any questions, please send those over to Afdeep, Kamal, or me. So we can either address them towards the end or like during the presentation itself. All right, let's get started. First off, I want to highlight the fact that it's completely okay not to know what you want to do with your life. I remember being in high school, like 12th grade, no idea what I wanted to study, no idea what I wanted to do. I remember thinking I'm going to be a graphic designer, because I had a Tumblr phase where I was like coding and web designing and doing all of that, and I loved art and I loved design. I didn't end up pursuing that. I remember wanting to be a social worker, a speech pathologist. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, but I was in my science classes, so that wasn't going to happen. So just all sorts of different, like going back and forth, all the things I was interested in. But I didn't decide on actually want to do, which is be a lawyer, until basically 2 years ago, right? That's my 3rd year. So it's okay not to know. This is the time, though, to start exploring your interest and what you think you might be interested in. Okay, and college is a perfect time. And no matter how much advice we give you today, and it's all advice, it's all activities and stuff, you won't know for real what you're interested in until you start actually getting involved in internships and volunteering opportunities, full-time jobs, part-time jobs, working with professors. That's how you know. So take our advice with a grain of salt, but know that it might not really come to you what you want to do until later on down the line when you start getting more involved. So some things to keep in mind as you start your career exploration: skills. What are you good at? Or what do you want to be good at? So your interests. So what do you enjoy doing? What are some things that you, although you feel like you're not great at it, you want to be down the line? Some values. What matters to you? What kind of environment do you want to be in when you start working? And some personality traits. What's a good fit for your personality? And Kamal's going to take us through some of these factors to keep in mind.
So hello, everyone. For those of you who are new, my name is Kamal, and I am one of the co-directors of the First Gen Empowerment Project, and I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania this May, and I'm currently a grad student at the National Taiwan University. I'm also a first-generation college student, and I'm really here just to make sure that I can provide as many resources as I can to first-generation students to ensure that we're helping each other out. So again, let us know how we're doing at the end of the slides. But I'm going to be going through the 4 different skills, or 4 different things you keep in mind as you navigate careers. So first off, we're going to be talking about skills. So skills are usually broken down into 2 different categories: hard skills and soft skills. But as you can see from the Venn diagram, they do overlap. So for hard skills, these are skills that are required for the jobs. And this is when we think about skills you obtain through some sort of a qualification. So whether that's through a vocational training program, or whether that's through specific coursework and activities. So that's examples are nursing, where you need to go to nursing school to become a nurse, computer programming, where you need a certain set of classes and experiences, accounting, writing, machine operation, languages. So these are all hard skills where there's certain experiences you need to obtain them. And soft skills are commonly referred to as people skills. So these are skills that you don't necessarily learn from formal training, but you learn throughout a wide variety of experiences. And these are skills which are highly transferable and universal. And these skills are often required by every single job. A lot of the skills y'all probably are developing right now or already have. And the common examples are leadership, communication, teamwork, empathy, skills where you don't need a certain experience or certain job to learn, but you do need a high level of, or like a rigorous experiences to obtain. So those are the 2 different categories for skills. Next slide. and back to the idea about having skills. So even as high school students or early high school grads, you already have a lot of these skills and you're going to keep on learning more. For instance, for school, your courses where you learn how to read, write, do math, that's all hard skills. And those are skills which are going to be extremely useful no matter where you are. Critical thinking, time management, organization are also skills. These are, you could put them in a category of soft skills, where these are going to be extremely useful in your careers. Even in clubs and sports, athletic skills can also be considered like hard skills and necessary for certain jobs. You learn leadership while being in sports and clubs, teamwork, event planning, fundraising, as well as volunteering and internships. These are ways for you to dip your toes into certain different fields and get to know, what skills do you even need to gain to be a researcher? What kind of skills do you need to be, what kind of skills do you need to be involved in production of different materials, as well as there are opportunities for you to network and make connections, which are highly relevant when it comes to moving up within certain industries.
I just want to say the people who wrote my recommendation letters for scholarships, for law school, for basically anything important, I met them through volunteering and internships. So it's not about just what you gain out of it. It's also about the people you meet, because if you make the right connections and people who really want to support you, they can help you with so many things in life. So it's super important to get involved. We have said this so many times, but school is only one part of what you should be doing in college. Outside of that, get involved as much as you can.
And for interest, another thing you should be keeping in mind. So you have a wide variety of interests, which are going to help you figure out what kind of careers you should explore. And look at the current extracurriculars and hobbies that you have. Do you see the possibility of you doing any of these for a living? Are you a photographer part-time? Academic subjects, what do you really like? Are you a math person? You just love math. Or maybe you are a writer and you just love writing English assignments and you could see yourself doing this for the long term, or even the short term, and considering how the job market works. Experiences. What experiences do you find fulfilling? Did you really love fundraising a certain amount of money for your club and you love that organization planning it out? As well as activities. What else have you done that you really loved and you could see yourself making a living out of? Next slide. And values. So when it comes to careers, values also play a role in the career you're going to have. And when we think about the job market, even now, you should be thinking about how much of a risk are you willing, especially now, how much of a risk are you willing to take? And this is especially important when it comes to business and entrepreneurship, because they could be very risky adventures, but also extremely fulfilling. So that's something you should be asking yourself. Variety or routine. Do you want to know exactly what, or do you just want to know what like your next week's gonna look like, your next month, a few months from now? Or do you see yourself as a freelancer where you love projects and you want to have a different experience in the next month? Do you want to be in like a different country every year? And do you like working alone or do you like working with others? How do you want to run a project? Do you want it to become entirely on your shoulders, or do you want to have other folks within a team? How often do you even want to work in a team? Do you like working in a team? These are just things you should be asking yourself, or you can ask yourself as you're navigating careers. And last but not least, for the things you should be considering as you're navigating careers, personality traits. How do you handle pressure and deadlines? And this can factor into different jobs when it comes into understanding whether you are someone who loves a strict deadline. You love the idea of having to get things done at a certain time, or maybe you're more someone who's more free and you would rather focus on the project, and it doesn't matter to you if it takes 2 weeks or 3 weeks to complete. Or maybe you're someone who's are you someone who's very detail oriented? You love the nitty gritty. You love getting involved in that process. Or are you someone who's big picture and you'd rather kind of manage everything externally? And for you, the details don't really matter. Or for you, the details just seem kind of annoying. Either way, there's careers within like the same industry that can focus on these different things, and they can let you know where you might be able to fit in. So that can go into like, even with education, are you someone who sees yourself as like directly like an educator focusing on the nitty gritty? Or are you someone who'd rather externally understand how educational institutions function and help them run? Both ways you're involved in education. Additionally, do you like to plan things or do you like to go with the flow? How do you manage yourself navigating this career? Because there's a huge variance when it comes to careers. And something you're going to be learning more and more throughout this, especially in the activity in the career panel. Even in the same industry, there's like a bajillion different careers and a bajillion different ways to be involved in healthcare, education, even law, as well as just like even art. When it comes to art, there's so many different ways to be an artist. And one way for y'all to navigate personality traits is to check out 16 Personalities, which is just a great website, which is free to figure out what kind of personality do you have and where can that fit into different careers.
Sort of side topic or off topic. These are all questions that honestly I've probably been asked during interviews before. So even though these are things you ask yourself, I think as you start applying for jobs and internships, it's good to have answers to all of these questions. Like, are you a big picture person? Are you a detail oriented person? How do you handle pressure? All things that you might be asked during an actual job or internship interview. So it's good to kind of have an answer that you have prepared in advance. And yes, big fan of 16 Personalities. I try to take it once every year, and my personality basically changes every year. And that's completely normal. It just means that it reflects what the kind of person you are at that time that you take it. So I think it's very useful. So we're going to do the activity right now, but right before I jump onto that, just a side note for undocumented students, your career exploration, your opportunities will look a little bit different from your peers, right? And that's mainly because undocumented students can't legally be employed, or no one can be legally employed without work authorization. And so if you're undocumented, you might not have work authorization. So in California, though, we are very fortunate because we have other ways of generating income and pursuing professional goals. So there is a law in California that allows everyone, regardless of immigration status, to get professional licenses. So what does that mean for you? It means that you can be an independent contractor. It means you can start your own business and sell whatever service, product, knowledge, skill set that you have. That doesn't require working for an organization or a company. So the distinction here is you can't work for somebody or for a company or organization, but you can provide services to them, right? So there is that distinction of you being an independent contractor. I'm sure you might have heard of that term before. And this goes for any undocumented immigrants in California. So not just students, but also your parents, any neighbors, anyone you know. So this is good for everybody to know. Some important resources I want to highlight, because this can be a completely separate and like whole other workshop on its own. But in the interest of time, I want you all to check out undocuhustle.org, which is basically this incredible website that provides you different ways to create professional opportunities for yourself with or without authorization, work authorization. And then the other thing I encourage you to do if you're undocumented is explore your immigration options. That means figuring out pathways to permanent residency or becoming a legal resident. And one option you have is immigrantsrising.org, or if you go to immigrantsrising.org/legal intake, they have an anonymous tool that you can fill out, and one of the staff members will get back to you with some of the available options you might have to become a legal resident or start that process, because it can be very lengthy. So I encourage you to check out those resources. If you have questions, please feel free to email us and we can help you more and give you more resources. Okay, activity time. So I know some of you might have already done part 1, but I want you to do it again because it's super quick and it's still gonna help you. So what we're doing today is finding, not majors, also that too, finding specific jobs and pathways that match your interest and your skills, okay? So that's what we're doing today. So part 1 is a career assessment. It'll take you like 3 to 4 minutes, super quick. And then part 2 is finding majors and specific jobs that match your career field, whatever pathway you get. It'll make more sense once you actually start doing it. The first thing you're gonna do is go to bit.ly/FGEP career cluster, okay? When you go there, it's gonna take you to this page and you're gonna click on start now. Take the assessment super quick, a few minutes, and then this pop-up, there's gonna be a pop-up screen that's gonna give you 5 different options. And these are the career pathways that match your skills and your interests. So that's the first thing. We'll give you about, I want to say 3 minutes to do this. And by the way, these are my results. So education training was number 1, which is no surprise because I do this work. Yeah, so please do that. And then once you're done, send me or Kamal your top 2 pathways so we can share them. 3 minutes. Remember, start sending us your top 2 choices so we can share them. Okay, maybe like 30 more seconds. Okay, so I'm gonna share some answers before we move to the next step. Amy says human services and health science. Rakshana says agriculture, food and natural resources, and architecture and construction. Harold says government and public administration. Evelyn got health science and human services. Alyssa got human services, arts and tech, and education training. Very cool, very diverse. Andre got science, tech, engineering, and math. Okay, so as you can see, everyone's sort of all over the place with the pathways that they got. That's completely normal. As you move on to the next step, I want you to think about whether those results surprise you. Like, does it make sense to you that you got those top 3 or top 5? Or is it like, wait, I had no idea I was going to get this as my number 1? Because I think that shows a lot about whether the answers you put actually matches the way you perceive yourself. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next one. Thank you all so much for sharing your answers. So next step, go to bit.ly/FGEP Explore, and this is going to take you to the College Board website, and it's titled Major and Career Search. Find one job that you find interesting. It doesn't have to be on the career pathways that you got as your top result. It could be anything, and just start reading through one of them. And let me know what job you find, and I might pick you to share your answers. One of the things I like about lists like this, although I want to say that it's incomplete because I don't think really any website can start to list off every job that exists on Earth. It's impossible, but these are some ones that you can start looking into and thinking about. And also, again, to pitch the College Board page, if you were to click on rehabilitation aid, on the side it will tell you other relevant jobs that are related to this specific one, but sort of different. So it helps you see what is out there that's kind of in that pathway. So for Amy, that's healthcare, right? Like that healthcare and human services. And that's just one job that she's found, but there's so many others to look into. All right, thank you so much, Amy. Thank you all so much for sharing your answers. We're gonna move on to the panel portion of our workshop today. So if you want some more resources to start exploring your major, but also your career, please check out these 2 websites. So when we put it on the website, like our First Gen Empower website, you will be able to click on the stickies and it will link you to the right place. So there are some amazing resources, some worksheets and assessments that will help you start to think about what you might be interested in doing down the line and what majors fit your career interests. All right, so we're at the career exploration panel part of our presentation. We have some incredible young professionals here to share their experiences with you. I have already prepared a couple of questions for them, but please send us any questions that you have. It doesn't have to be super serious, whatever is on your mind, anything you want to talk about, any advice you want, please feel free to share them either with me or Kamal. All right, so thank you all so much for being here. Before we start with our questions, I would love if we could go down the line and have each of you introduce yourselves. And we'll start with Pratyusha.
Awesome. So hi, everybody. I'm Pratyusha. I also go by Preeti. I went to UC Berkeley and graduated in 2018, so actually 2 years ago, and I have 2 degrees. My first one is computer science and as well as economics. So I double majored at Cal. I guess my educational trajectory, I grew up in the Central Valley, so Bakersfield, California, that's where I'm from. And I'd only really intended to go to business school originally when I started off looking at colleges. So I only applied to business schools across the states. I decided to go to Berkeley because it was in-state tuition and had the number 2 business school at the time. And when I got to Berkeley, what was interesting is that I had my freshman year, I lived on a floor in a dorm where half of the guys on my floor were taking CS classes. And so after the first semester that I was at Cal, I just kept seeing everyone around me code and like spending like all day and night doing all these random coding problems. And eventually I was just like, I should just try one of these classes. And I had a friend at the time who was quite influential in my life, and he was like, coding is so much fun, and it's such a fun time. It's so great. You're going to love it. And so he basically encouraged me to take my first coding class. And I hadn't actually taken any classes in high school prior to this, so I just kind of jumped in with no experience whatsoever into my first coding class my second semester at Cal. And needless to say, it absolutely kicked my butt. It was the hardest class I ever took at the time, and I did marginally well. I wasn't like the best at the class. I wasn't the worst, but I did pretty well. And I decided to take another class because at the end of that class, my friend had said, if you liked this class, take the next one that's even more fun. And I believed him. So that's really what kickstarted my journey into the computer science degree almost really by accident. And I ended up doing that and economics. And so at the end of college, I had a couple of career options, and one was to go into finance and kind of consulting, or to go into computer science, which is maybe the more traditional tech role. I kind of chose something in the middle. So currently, I'm a project manager at Microsoft, and I work in cybersecurity. So that's kind of, yeah, where I'm at.
Thank you so much, Preeti. That's incredible. And yeah, I remember all of the CS bros in the library at Cal just coding away. It looked very stressful. Erika, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Erika Ramos. I'm undocumented, so I came here when I was 10 years old from city of Mexico. Well, Mexico's Nayarit, the big Nayarit. And I grew up in Santa Ana. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know I could attend college until my senior year, when I met my counselor my senior year. So I didn't know counselors existed. I didn't know this person. I was like, why are you trying to help me? Like, I wasn't really sure what the counselors were doing. And to me, my world was soccer. I want to be a soccer player. That was like my thing. And I didn't have an option B. I didn't know I had that option until I met my counselor. And then when I met her, she brought so much like reassurance about our future. So I wanted to do that. I became interested more in college. So I attended community college, graduated with an associate's, and then transferred to Cal State San Bernardino, where I majored in psychology. And then after that, in 2016, I started my master's program in educational counseling. So I graduated from Laverne recently this May. So I finally, after so many years, I finally achieved my master's degree. But I feel like everything is like happening for a reason. So I'm here for a certain reason. So I really enjoy helping other students like myself that were not really sure what they wanted to do with their lives. So I'm really happy that I got so much experience going into grad school and being able to help others like myself. And so if you guys have any questions, just feel free to ask.
Thank you so much, Erika. Rudmila, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Rudmila. So I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, so I'm actually on the East Coast. And in middle and high school, I definitely found myself leaning towards my science classes more. And going into college, I was thinking about like potential career paths and things like that. And I realized I wanted to combine science with, still being able to interact with people, still being able to form connections. And it seemed like just talking from people, so no one in my family has pursued medicine prior, like no one close. So talking to friends, parents, college counselors, things like that, seemed like pre-med was the way to go. And the way I went into college thinking about it was kind of like, I have this going right now, but I'm not sure about it. And I'll like look into other things, see if they fit for me. And if not, then like maybe we'll keep doing this, because it seemed like something that was easier to opt out of rather than opt into later on. So I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I majored in cognitive science, and I graduated in 2019, no longer this past May. I can't believe it's already been a year. But while there, I thought about, other things I could be doing with cognitive science, and I did research for a little bit in a lab, and I was like, this is fun and all, but I don't necessarily see myself pursuing this as a career. And the more I learned about medicine, the more interested I became in it. In college, I became really involved in advocacy efforts, whether it was for the Asian American community or for the West Philly community, and just learning more about how doctors can be advocates for their patients was really, really appealing to me. So I stuck with the pre-med thing. I took my MCAT my junior year, spring, and then I applied straight through, which was actually a very interesting decision, and I might have done it differently had I had another chance. So if you guys have questions about gap years or things like that, would be very happy to answer those. But so I applied straight through, and then I started med school this past August, I guess, at the University of Pennsylvania. So I'm still at Penn, and I just finished my first year.
Thank you so much. Congrats on surviving your first year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mitchell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Everyone, my name is Mitchell. I am from LA. Originally, I'm from a suburb of Mexico City called Toluca. So I also am undocumented. I'm one of those people that had a total shift in what I was supposed to do, like when I was younger in my mind versus what I am actually doing. When I was younger in high school, I totally thought I was going to do medicine. I worked as like an intern at a doctor's office. All my extracurriculars were like medical school related. However, once I got into college, I went to community college first. I went to SMC for several years. I was there for about 4 years. Once I was at SMC and taking like pre-med courses, I realized how terrible I was at them. And it wasn't even terrible because I was dumb. It was more terrible because I just wasn't like at the right maturity level, I think, that at that point I needed to be to really take on the rigors of being a pre-med student. So I ended up taking a bunch of different random courses in different areas to try to explore what I really wanted to do. I took stuff in like poli-sci and philosophy and business, just really across the board. And during that time, I ended up getting a job at a lawyer's office, and it was just randomly. It was someone that I had met while at another job. It was a client I had met at another job. And he offered me a job as an intern at his law firm, just really doing admin stuff, like nothing really legal related, literally answering phones, like taking notes, that sort of thing. But I really loved it. I loved being in that space. It was like a young lawyer, so the whole office was just a bunch of like youngish people. And they were super supportive of me really not knowing what I wanted to do. So I kind of started exploring maybe eventually going to law school, and I started taking more classes in community college geared towards law school. And eventually I transferred to UC Berkeley. I was a legal studies major at UC Berkeley. And when I was a senior at Cal is when I first took the LSAT, which is the entrance exam for law school. And again, totally bombed it. I like sucked at it. I got a terrible score. But I knew that that's what I was interested in doing, is going to law school. So I gave myself some time to figure out a plan. Eventually what I did is I took a year off after college to work and study for the LSAT. So I took this gap year. And during that year, all I was doing was literally working and studying. And eventually I took the LSAT again. And this past May, I graduated from Harvard Law. So it all came, I guess, full circle in the end.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on graduating and surviving law school. And finally, last but not least, Afdeep, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody who actually already know you?
Hi, everyone. So a lot of you may have seen me in other workshops. My name is Afdeep. I graduated from Berkeley last year, 2019, spring, with a degree in political economics, but I will be going into, I'm an incoming associate consultant at a consulting firm called the Bridgespan Group. So I'm going to represent a little bit of the business side of perspective. I had no idea what I actually wanted to do with my life. Sort of like the stories that you've heard today from all the other panelists. So just to reassure you, you don't need to know. I went into university thinking I wanted to work for the UN, and like I just knew that I wanted my job to include traveling and helping people. And that's as vague of an idea as I had. And then realized that in order to go into the UN, most of the time you need to like have masters and PhDs sometimes. So I switched my goal to the Foreign Service. And then the Foreign Services goals didn't really necessarily align with mine by the time I was like midway through college. So I just explored until I stumbled upon various internships that sort of got me started on the path that I am on now. I think the thing that really changed my trajectory was my internship with this nonprofit called Kiva.org, which does impact investing and invests in really awesome social enterprises around the world. So I got to see a lot of amazing business models being implemented in so many different industries around the world and yielding just really incredible results. From there, I chose to go into consulting, but nonprofit consulting. So my job basically entails giving strategic advice and solving problems for nonprofits and impactful companies around the world.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Afdeep. I don't think you've actually shared your career goals with our students before. So another question I have for you all what are some of the challenges, if you had to pick like one or two things that you feel like kept being a persistent problem or a challenge, either during undergrad or during grad school, what would that be, and how did you address those challenges? And I guess I'll start from the other side. So Avdeep, you can go first.
It's a really, really good question. I think for me, the challenge really was just not knowing what I wanted to do. I didn't have a major like computer science where I knew I would become a computer scientist. There's obviously so much more variety that you can do while you have that major, but my major was political economy, and it's so broad, really. So for me, the persistent challenge that I had was just not knowing what I wanted to do. And I still don't, but like I'm doing fine enough. So I think like my takeaway would just be explore as much as you can. You don't have to have a path. Just do things and get internships and work on projects and do extracurriculars and all the things that you're interested in.
Thank you, Afdeep. Mitchell?
Yeah, so I would say that there was two really major like roadblocks, I guess, that were consistent. One was like finances, just money, and like letting that play this role of keeping you demotivated. You know, if you're in high school and you're trying to go to college and you think, well, how am I going to pay for it? That sort of demotivates you. If you're in college and you're thinking about grad school, you're like, well, how am I going to pay for it now? Again, it's like demotivation. But all along, I kind of figured this is more of an investment in yourself, right? Like the money that you're either you yourself are investing, or if you apply for scholarships or grants or however the finances work out for you, it's all going to work out in the end. Like that component of it shouldn't be what keeps you from trying to go to college or trying to go to graduate school. So that's like one of the things that was roadblocks that really lingered throughout. The other one I would say is that there was no one ahead of me that sort of was there to help me out. And by that, I mean, I don't come from a family of lawyers. I don't come from a family of college graduates. I was the first one to go to college. So it's not like there was someone ahead of me that kind of like this group is. I didn't have a group like this that was like, okay, well, if you're going to apply for scholarships, this is one way to do it. If you're going to, you know, move to college, this is some advice. Like I didn't have that. So I think that was another major roadblock. And it took really just admitting to people that you needed help. You know, people that are quiet, you know, closed mouth doesn't get fed. So if you need the help, as sort of awkward or embarrassing as it can be sometimes, in the end, most people are more than willing to help, and all they want is for you to ask, right? People love to talk about themselves. They love to like feel good about helping someone else. So I think that's just one thing, is you really kind of have to put yourself out there. I'm not a super extroverted person in most circumstances, so it really did take a lot for me to turn into that person eventually. So that'd be one of my pieces of advice is really try to put yourself out there in terms of asking for the help when you need it.
That's great advice for every aspect of life, not just careers, not just school. Anytime you need help, it's important to ask. Rudmila, would you like to share?
Yeah, of course. Well, I was going to say what Mitchell was sharing in terms of just asking for help in terms of advice. Like, I think medicine definitely has earned the reputation of being an ivory tower process. If you guys have heard that term, just in terms of like, it's very hard to get in if you're not already in, and the elites are the ones that do well because they have access to all these resources. But definitely asking for help is what I think got me through the process, not having anyone in my direct circle to ask. And like, for example, even if you don't have upperclassmen friends that are directly involved in the field, maybe they have friends who are, so if like asking them to reach out to their network. And I would say another thing is, and this is definitely true for other fields and not just medicine, but I feel like especially pre-meds, you kind of feel like you are constantly comparing yourself because you're like, oh, these are the people I'm applying against, you know, like what are they doing compared to as what I'm doing? Am I like fitting and checking off the boxes that like schools want from me? And I think the biggest lesson for me in undergrad that really helped me throughout the application process was just be yourself. Like, it sounds so cheesy, but like med schools really do not just want another, you know, like checked off all the boxes, had no passion about anything. So just like, you know, pursue what you want to pursue. And if that aligns with medicine, then like apply to medical school. For example, I have a friend in my class who was an English major in undergrad, and then she did domestic violence work for 2 years, and then she did a post-bac program and took her pre-med classes, and then is now in med school. So, you know, you don't have to, like, if you're interested in biology and biomedical things in undergrad, like, great, perfect, that's awesome too, but like, don't feel pressure to like put yourself into certain boxes because that's what you think like your future grad school or your future employer wants from you. You know, there are other ways to pick up the skills, like post-bac programs, extracurriculars, things like that. So you don't need to sacrifice, you know, what you're studying, what you're involving yourself in just because you think that's like what they want to see from you.
That's amazing advice. Don't do things for your resume. Do things because you're actually interested in them. Thank you. Erika?
For me, I would say I would have to agree with Mitchell. It was the financially trying to figure out how we're gonna pay, how is this, because for my bachelor's degree, I even had a change of heart kind of thing. So I started with sociology major, and then I was like, well, I don't really like the class. I kind of like more because I took a psychology class in high school, and I fell in love with it. So I'm like, I'm gonna change my major and go into psychology, and that was like the first quarter was like hard because of the switch, right? And I wasn't sure, like I was just kind of getting my feet wet, see if I really gonna like it and all this stuff. But I feel like at the same time I was like my worst enemy because I was rushing. Every time I was rushing, like, oh, this I like Remla was saying, competing, not competing, but like seeing what others are doing, and you're like feeling like you're not doing as much for yourself, and just kind of rushing through things instead of enjoying it. So I would say just kind of enjoy the process and take classes that you feel will be related to your own interest, and that way like explore what you really what's really gonna be your passion. Because at the end of the day, I think Mitchell also shared that he was in a place where he didn't really feel like that's what something that he wanted to do, and then really explore somewhere else. So definitely, if you have a change of heart, it's totally okay, but it has to be something that you feel passionate about, and don't compete against yourself. Just kind of take the time and go and enjoy it, and take internships, and give yourself props for all the hard work that you're doing, because as students we do go through a lot of emotions, a lot of things during school. So yeah, just kind of enjoy it and don't rush through school.
Great advice. Thank you, Erika. Preeti, do you want to share?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing that was both a struggle and a frustration of mine during college and even now is there's a large like percentage of women especially who feel imposter syndrome. Even now, even at Berkeley, especially and what I was in for me, it was especially in computer science because when you look in the room, even at a school like Berkeley where we have tons of women in computer science, the ratio is still pretty low. So when you look around the class, there's maybe not as many of us as we'd like. And the other thing that I saw as I took my first one or two classes or first couple of classes, actually, the first 2 years at Cal, was that there's a GPA requirement essentially to major in computer science. And a lot of people experience what you call like weeding out, right? Like you don't make the GPA cut and then you're out of the major. And so what I started seeing is a lot of women around me opting out. So instead of going for it and saying, you know what, like I'm going to do my best and, you know, maybe I won't get in, but I'm going to do it anyway. I saw a lot of women especially taking this out of the equation. I didn't really see guys doing that as much, but I've noticed it especially in a lot of women around me. And to be very honest, like I wasn't passionate about computer science. And so I'm going to contradict what some of the other speakers say, but this is why we have diversity of opinions maybe on this panel is it doesn't have to be that you're super passionate about what you study, okay? I wasn't passionate about computer science. I'm still not. If you ask me why I did it, it's for two reasons. One, because I took a class, it was interesting, but what I didn't like women weeding themselves out. So I wanted to prove I could do it, right? That like regardless of the fact that I hadn't taken a computer science class until I'd gotten to Cal versus maybe lots of people who had gotten to Cal after coding for like 10 years since they were 5 years old, okay? These are the type of people that you'll see surround you. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It just matters that you decide that you want to do it and you want to complete it. And maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. But when I saw women around me like taking themselves out, even though that was something they wanted, I decided that I was just going to finish it. And it was brutal, to be very honest, because I wasn't really good at it. I wasn't talented. I'm naturally gifted if you have affinity towards business, towards economics, and I'm good at it. So if I look at how much time I spent into my economics degree versus my computer science degree, it's probably like 80-20. So it was a lot of like blood, sweat, and tears that I put into getting that degree. And really, like, for me, my long-term aspirations are to be an entrepreneur. And looking at the world, I was like, hey, I'm good at business, but the world is moving towards tech, so maybe I need this skill set in kind of like my resume, right? It gives me some credibility. So I did it I had my own reasons for doing it. But all I'm trying to say is that the frustration, that you can use frustration towards, I guess, problems that you see or circumstances that other people are dealing with, and use it to channel your own success. Because the best thing that I can say is that the only person that can kind of get you something that you want is you. And if you are able to achieve something that maybe people around you didn't think was possible, you just open a door for everybody else. And so sometimes if you see these barriers, use them as motivation. Use it as not just for you, but for everyone around you that you can lift up through your success. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I have chills just hearing all of that. That's incredibly inspiring. Okay, so we have a ton of student questions. So I'll start with Kitchit. I'm so sorry, I still don't know how to pronounce your name properly. We need to have that talk. She's asking, how has medical school been so far, and what degree did you graduate with before going to med school? I think that's for Rudmila.
So I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Cognitive Science. It's kind of a cross between neuroscience and psych at Penn, but you can kind of mix and match and make it whatever you want it to be. The first year of medical school was definitely interesting. I was so nervous going into it just because you hear so much about it. So Penn has one of the most, I think, the highest number of class hours per week inside of school. So the first week I was maybe spending, I want to say, like 30 hours of class a week. So I would say that was maybe the first semester. So yeah, come on, I see your face. That's it was kind of intense. So I think that was a major just shock. You know, in college you're used to spending however much from 12 to maybe 20 hours a week in class. But yeah, it was 0 to 100 for sure. The first day, they just jump you right in and you have no idea what to expect. So I think the first round of exams, everyone, not just me, like, you think you're the only one freaking out, but everyone was freaking out just in terms of like trying to figure out their study schedules or like, you know, what works for them and stuff. But then everyone kept telling us, you know, the upperclassmen, that like it would be fine, everything would be fine. And none of us believed them. But then the first round of exams came and it really was fine. And with every kind of ensuing round of exams, it just became more and more fine. You know, you figured out more like your study schedule, like what worked for you, what didn't. And I think what really helped me was just so many people were like, you know, sadly, this is the easiest you're going to have it in med school, and this is the most time you're going to have in your life. So like, yes, academics are important, but just like make sure to be a happy person too. And I very much took that advice very seriously, especially because Penn and a lot of med schools, I would say the vast majority of med schools, have switched to pass-fail preclinical years. So when you're still doing the lecture-based classes, you know, it's either you pass or you fail. And 85 is the same as a 95 is the same as a 75. So, you know, if that's what intrinsically motivates you, then that's great. But for me, you know, it was like a pass is a pass, and I'm not gonna kill myself over getting a grade that's not gonna, you know, impact my future. So once, you know, I got into that mentality, like being pre-med, you feel like you have to be perfect. So like breaking out of like you have to be perfect mentality was so good for me. And I think that let me enjoy med school a lot more. It's really cool, just, you know, this is like some theoretical thing you work towards for however long, but seeing everything being tied to cases and stuff, and just seeing it like knowing you're gonna learn these things to have a direct impact on someone's health has been really inspirational and motivational. I think an important thing to be candid about is, like I alluded to before, you know, med school does contain a certain degree of elitism, and it takes a certain level of privilege to be able to get to med school, and that is reflected in who you're surrounded by. For example, 80% of my class's parents have graduate degrees, and that's definitely reflected. So, you know, our curriculum does include a social component. And some of the conversations that I've had, I've honestly been surprised I'm having in med school, because you'd think, like, you know, medical school, people are compassionate, people are empathetic. So I'd say one of the biggest culture shocks for me in med school was also just hearing opinions that, like, you're like, should a future medical provider be saying these things? But, you know, I think it's, the way I tell myself is it's a good practice run for, you know, patients with diverse opinions as well. So I would say the first year was very challenging, both you know, in terms of like social dynamics with the class, but also like figuring out my study schedule. But like once I figured out, like I loved it. It's been really great. I feel like I've grown a lot as a person, and I'm very, very happy.
Great, thank you so much. Amy asks, I guess it's a general question, but maybe we'll have a couple of people answer this one. What is something you would have liked to tell your younger self? So go back a couple of years, what would you tell yourself? Oh, and anyone can go. I'm not picking people unless it's a volunteering situation and I have to.
I can actually jump on this one. So I think one thing that I would definitely tell my younger self is that going through high school, I had this image that the path in front of me was supposed to be a certain way. You know, you graduate high school, you go to 4 years of college, you graduate and either start work or you go to graduate school, and that's like another 3 or 4 or 7 years, depending on what you do. And like, that's not the case at all, right? I mean, I ended up graduating from high school. I went to UC Berkeley for like a week. I had to drop out because I didn't have the finances to afford it. I came back to LA. I went to community college for 4 years. Then, you know, took another sort of gap year before I transferred to UC Berkeley again, and then took another year before I applied to law school. So it was like a very weird, windy path. And like, it definitely was not the traditional, you know, graduate high school and then go to college. And that's okay, because by the time that I got to college, I was about 23, 24 years old. And I was a junior in college, whereas my like classmates were younger. And it was just like, it was fine. The fact that I had taken like a different windy path, and it all worked out. So I think that's one thing I would tell myself, is it's not a direct path.
Thank you so much, Mitchell.
I'm gonna maybe add on to that comment, is that even if it is a direct path to maybe your first goal, like for example, I went through straight to 4 years of college and had a job lined up by the end of my senior year to go straight into a corporate job. Even if you take that direct route, you may decide to pivot later, right? You can pivot or like change what your mind in college. You can also change your mind after college, right? It's okay to like go through and maybe achieve what you think you'll like, and then, you know, spend 1 or 2 years in a role and decide you don't want to do that and do something else. So really, I think a lot of the other speakers touched on this, of allowing yourself to explore and achieve and fail, and then, you know, try again. So I mean, I think one of the things that I would tell myself when I was younger is to maybe be a little less harsh on myself, because I think a lot of us tend to be really, really hard on ourselves for what we did or did not achieve. And I still have to tell myself to do that every day. And I think one good thing that I did do when I was, you know, in college, is that I just kind of went for things. And I think Rudmila actually touched on this when she talks about being your authentic self. I have a story about actually how I'm honest to God, how I think I got my Microsoft job. And I remember standing in a line, and this is like a room packed full of UC Berkeley students. So there's like 100 to 150 people trying to cram into a room that really can only fit 50 for these Microsoft representatives that were taking resumes. And I remember standing in line to drop off my resume, and there was this girl in front of me, or there was a girl behind me and this guy in front of me. And I remember like peeking over this guy's shoulder, and he has like a 4.0 perfect GPA and like all of these tech projects lined up on his resume. And I remember looking down at my GPA and my resume, and I was like, oh my God, there's like no way I'm getting a job. And I turned to the girl behind me, and I was like, dude, what is this? And she's like, I don't know. I'm just gonna have to drop my resume too. She's like, I don't know. This doesn't look good for us. And so we ended up just going and dropping off our resumes on that table. And really, I was like, I don't know. Like, our chances are slim. But I ended up getting an interview. I ended up flying out to interview at Seattle. I ended up getting a job. I ended up taking the offer. And the girl that was standing behind me that had the exact same doubts that I did ended up getting an offer too. So we both ended up at Microsoft. Even though standing in that line, like, it was like a moment of despair, really, when you're looking at everyone who is quote perfect, and you're like, how do I even compete with this? And I remember like this, and then another moment during my final round interview at Microsoft. I had one out of my 4 interviewers was actually a woman. And in this conversation with that woman, I just like misheard something that she said. I think she asked me a question, and for whatever reason, I interpreted it or heard it as like how you dress, right? Like I think she I don't know what she was talking about, but basically, I completely misheard her, and I like went on this rant about how I was really angry that there was a perception about women in tech not being well dressed. And this is just like a random like interview topic, right? But I spoke so passionately about that I really think that changed my entire interview loop. I'm pretty sure I did pretty well otherwise, but for whatever reason, I'm like, stay true to like what you actually believe in, and I think things will actually work out. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Preeti. All of you are so inspiring, and I really hope that to everyone out there, I hope this encourages you to pursue what you are interested in, even if it's not something you're passionate about. And the other thing, we have dropped everybody's emails. Preeti, if you want, you can also drop your email on the chat box for folks. So I know we had a ton more questions we can't get to. So if you want to individually contact any of our guest speakers, feel free to do so. And that's it for our workshop. Thank you all so much for coming. I know we're running out of time. Please take our survey though, even if you leave the meeting. It's tinyurl.com/firstgensummer. Let us know how we're doing so we can keep improving our workshops. And our next workshop is on Monday, and it's the final part of our Money Monday series. It's on creating a budget while you're in college. So please come if you are interested in personal finances, and it's something that everybody should be learning more about. So thank you all so much for coming to our workshop. Thank you to our guest speakers for sharing their experiences. And I hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone. And I'll stick around too if anyone has any personal questions.